I just finished reading this fascinating book. Yeah, I just finished reading it yesterday. Last week I read through this book, and it's called, in English, written by Jonathan Cahn, American Messianic pastor, New York Times bestseller. I don't know what denomination he's part of. It doesn't really matter. I think as long as what he shares is truth. And I think there is a lot of truth in this book. And New York Times bestselling author.
English?
The English title is Return of the Gods.
Return of the Gods.
Return of the Gods. And I just want to share at least some thoughts from here, because I think it is very... I thought it was fitting well with kind of the topic here. In short, so he starts with describing this parable. Basically from Jesus. Jesus explains that, you know, if someone is possessed by a demon and the demon is driven out, if it's not filled with something good, like if it's empty, 7 demons will come in and will be worse afterwards. And he says, actually, Jesus says this is how it will be for this generation or something like this. So he makes the point that this is true not only for individuals, but even for generations, for nations, for society, kind of thing. That's the point he makes here in the book.
That's really interesting. I've never thought about that.
I haven't really thought about that either. But then he starts to look at basically like some of the there's a lot of idolatry in the time of the Bible that even crept into the church, into Israel as a nation, the people of God, and he looks at some of the core main idols from that time, from Mesopotamia around that time, that impacted so many cultures and also Israel, Baal and Moloch and Ishtar. And then you see some verses in the Bible basically indicating that idol worship there are demonic forces involved with that. They have a verse in Psalms and different places he refers to some verses about that, and I think that's definitely truth to that. But then what he does is that he explains how when Christianity came, this idol worship and the wicked ceremonies and many things that were part of that were driven out from society. It came into the dark again. It used to be mainstream, it used to be very common, but now it was kind of forbidden and kind of just maybe like secretly some of it was done. But then he describes that how many of the same things maybe in a different form have entered into our world. And he looks at the US and the development in the US the last 60-70 years that has also impacted in a similar way. You had a similar development in the Western countries. So basically look in the Christian world, countries that have been, in many ways you could say, a Christian country, like the US, for instance, in many ways a Christian country. But then what started to happen was, first of all, they started to forbid the word of God in the schools. They removed crosses and Bibles and the law, the commandments from public places. More and more, they started to remove many of those, basically the Christianity from the public forum, but then what happened, and what he describes here, is like the problem was you remove that and then it wasn't filled with something good, like so there was this emptiness, and then this demonic, this bad things started to come in, and then he looks at lots of parallels. There are lots of details and many parallels that are very interesting and fits really well. I don't think, even if not every detail would be, you don't need all the details. The main overall message is a lot of truth to it. But he looks at, for instance, Moloch. Okay, Moloch, they used to, and even Israelites, they came there, they sacrificed children to Moloch. Today, we don't do that to an idol. We don't do that in the fire. Right. But through abortion has become now accepted even in Christian countries, and millions die through abortion. And the disregard for life is different than it used to be. You see marriage breaking down. It used to be respected, and sexuality used to be, Ishtar is the goddess of sexuality, and you had lots of promiscuity connected with her. You had homosexuality, you had transgenderism, things like this. Lots of things like this that was part of the festivals, the feast that they had with her and her priests and priestesses and so on. And he describes how gradually these things have come in. First it was maybe just tolerated, and eventually it became, got more and more rise, and the law of the land, and eventually people that believe differently are not tolerated anymore, and they are spoken against. So basically now, moving from a Christian country, more and more of these things that is clearly condemned, promiscuity, sex outside of marriage, and so on, and we have seen it come into even Christian societies, and now it's the law of the land, and somewhat I think it's really signs of the times. For thousands of years since Christianity came into the world, everywhere marriage between man and woman has been the law.
Right.
And sexuality within marriage, and even secular people, they would, like, in the beginning when TV came, and by the way, he talks a bit about how media has played a big role in the change.
Yeah.
Like, any sexual scenes it was not allowed. Like, it's changed so much what they show, and very fascinating book. And I think you really see these things happening, and I think it's a sign of the time. You have verses in Jude talking about sexual immorality as one of the signs of the last. Jesus said it would be like the time of Sodom and Gomorrah, and one things we see there is that you had homosexuality was a common thing. Even the word sodomy in English,
exactly.
it refers to especially homosexuality and bestiality and
sexual perversion.
Yeah, basically. And Jesus said that's the time of the last days. Ellen White also, she amplifies some of these things as well. She says also that this is one of the main signs of the last days, so this will be a sign in the very end. And it's really like in a few decades, things have, like, crosses have been removed. Now you have pride flags everywhere. Every public building, all embassies in the US, around the world. And also, when you think about this, one point in it as well, it's like most countries, they have a national day. One day a year, they celebrate the national day.
Yes.
And now Pride is a whole month. In like all these countries that have so many things they don't have in common, they are united. Like it's incredible how this. And like if you believe anything differently, you're cancelled. You're hated. You're like intolerant.
Which is ironic, like, because the way that this all came in was for a message of tolerance and being inclusive.
Yeah.
But then once that is accepted, then like what you said, tolerance goes out of the door, and people who think differently are no longer allowed to do so.
Yeah.
They're not allowed to voice their own opinions. They might not even have their own opinions if it's it's very an aggressive.
And I think and gradually it starts with tolerance, then it's accepted and it's celebrated, and then you have persecution. That's often like the progress. And it's like it's gotten worse and worse. Like many things, and he describes how like the society that it used to be and today, like it's so different. You can't almost recognize it's the same. And even like he talks about, I actually watched a documentary recently, the national Swedish television, a secular documentary about democracy, make democracy great again. Will democracy survive? In many countries around the world, democracy is under serious threat. And one thing, and I think one reason is this movement has really pushed, because now you're removing tolerance. You're removing almost the freedom of speech. You're not allowed to believe differently. Like it's kind of like a soft totalitarianism,
right.
and it's really like when you think about that, all these countries that for so long has been like the core identity of the country. These democratic values, they're like being thrown out the door. Like it's amazing. And he argues that this is not just developments, it's demonic forces behind this. This is like a return of the gods. He used kind of like an interesting way to describe how all these things have come in, and it's leading away from Christianity and the Christian faith. And
so what you're saying is, because the picture that to my mind kind of comes is reading through the book of Kings in the Bible, and it's the whole time like this king did what was good in the eyes of the Lord, and made changes and implemented things, but then the son, he did what was wicked in the eyes of the Lord, and it keeps going like this back and forth. And I mean, that's the reason why the Old Testament is that big, because it keeps going this back and forth. So what we're seeing now is then those same kind of principles, those same the same activities or things happening in the culture, or the way of thinking, the mindset, we're seeing it now returning, but not necessarily in the same form where we have statues and people worship those statues, but it's the same kind of foundations, the same mindset as keeps being repeated.
Many of the same practices are coming into.
Yes.
And even he gets into some details, even how they place this ox on Wall Street, like a big monument, which was the symbol of Baal, which is also connected with. There are many details, even some
Hollywood,
symbolism. Even also the rainbow is connected with Ishtar, and there's like there are many details that are also kind of fascinating. But I think the most important is kind of the same practices are coming in different ways, and he argues that U.S. is no longer a Christian nation. it's a heathen nation. And that could be said with several other formerly Christian nations. But it's very interesting. He describes several things that many of us know, but he describes it well and shows kind of like how far we have come, how many steps. Like, it's quite incredible how can all of this happen, and also how, like, for instance, how this agenda is promoted from very young age to all the media. Like, watch just this innocent like TV shows, and like they are pushing this, and the school books, and how like and now people they are getting surgeries, they are changing their gender without the parents' permission, very young age. Like, it's quite incredible. Like,
you're not allowed to drive, you're not allowed to drink alcohol, you're not allowed to do all these kind of things because you're not mature enough. But if you feel that you are a different gender than your biologist tells you, no problem, go and change it. And
they make decisions for life, right? And but it's allowed, and also, like, but very gradually, like he describes also how for quite some time, you know, in Hollywood and in media, like in the TVs, like usually the woman is described as the hero, the wife, or the man. They can do everything. They don't need anyone, and the man is kind of like the stupid one. Like, he doesn't know, he can't do anything, and he's like
always in need of help.
And they have kind of really attacked the family, and especially men. Especially men. I think Satan has really known, like, to destroy society, this is what we need to do, and he has really worked. Like, gradually, like, things are going more and more down in many ways, and things are like, imagine how many broken families, how many, and actually he also talked about statistically, or like research show that women that really, like, now they're pushed to really having to focus on careers, and marriage is not so stable, not really something we care about today, and this and that, but women that, like, they're less happy. And I think we are moving away from God's plan, God's ideal, and it doesn't give us the same peace, the same confidence and assurance for in our relationships and in our, you know, like, it's not what is best for us. It may seem tempting, it may be promoted as the best way of life, but it's not really better. It doesn't give more happiness.